Only once he called me up when some channel, which was running a headline called Choron Ka Sardar around 10 in the night. That was I remember that evening very well, and I was not at home, and I took that call, and they said that the PM is very upset with this. So it did hurt him. It did hurt him. It did hurt his family. My heart goes out to them that they were there and they were looking at this spectacle of their father, who was a very dignified and a very well educated and proved all over the world his worth. He was being vilified like this. I've never talked about it. That time I used to do my work, never used to talk about it on media and all that. I never wrote anything in any newspaper. I didn't do anything because I was following his lead. In last 2 3 days you'll be wondering why I'm talking about it, because I think the men's record has to be put straight.
Sonia Gandhi was at the helm of affairs at that point in time in the Congress party. So what was that dynamic like between the Prime Minister's office and Mrs. Sonia Gandhi?
Wall of China. The political interactions used to take place when Mrs. Gandhi and the core committee, as it was known, they used to assemble almost every week. And to tell you the truth, I never used to go to those because I'm an official. I've got nothing to do with party politics. So I never used to go for these core committee things. I thought, it's a great thing. There'll be like a Press Club of India forever with Dr. Manmohan Singh's foundation stone name on it. And I thought it's going to be a big win. He said, so close to the elections, I remember his words, I don't want to be seen currying favors with the press. But that's the decency of the man, and that's the integrity of the man, and that's why I'm talking to you, Abhishek, that I want that decency and integrity to be known to the people.
Former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh was cremated with full state honors on Saturday, in the presence of dignitaries from across the world. Often called the Scholar PM, his tenure as a Prime Minister lasted 2 complete terms between 2004 and 2014. He's credited with opening up the Indian economy and the nuclear deal, among other things. And as it happens in public life, especially politics, he was often subjected to harsh criticism by his political opponents. Monikers like the reluctant PM or remote control were also often used to characterize his tenure and leadership. But some of these things are just that. Kuch to log kahenge, logon ka kaam hai kehna. And a politician's life, reluctant or proactive, is marked by many such things. To talk about what was Dr. Manmohan Singh as a person and as a Prime Minister, I'm joined by someone who worked with him closely. He had the dual privilege of not just covering him, but also working with him as his communications advisor. Mr. Pankaj Pachauri, a veteran journalist who went on to join the Prime Minister as his communications advisor, as I said earlier. Thank you for taking out the time, Mr. Pachauri, and thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
You had the privilege of not just covering him as a journalist, but you also, worked very closely with him. So how would you characterize him?
See, I joined the government in 2012 January when this movement, this India against corruption movement, was at its peak, and that was one of the reasons why I joined that the government, because I was thinking I've been working on economy. I used to do a program called Money Mantra. So you can imagine that everything which is in our financial markets and in our business economy, I used to be on top of that because I was working on that program. So when I joined this, there's one thing which was very clear, that the economy was doing well. And people across the world on my show, a lot of people used to come, and business leaders, and they'll say things are going on fine. There were some problems at that time, but he was. So I joined it because I knew at that time that if India continued to strive that 8% GDP growth per year for another 10 years, I think we could have moved from low middle income to middle income country on a whole, the way we were going. It needed another 10 years of 8% growth. And then I saw this prime minister coming under very harsh criticism, and I didn't offer my services. Someone just called me. It was a cold call that we'd like to talk to you, and I just went there and I had a whole one page of summary of what the prime minister's office was not doing at that time in terms of television and social media. Just that bit. So they say, why did you
Right.
do
So,
it?
so you went prepared.
Yeah, I was naturally prime minister is calling you.
Yeah.
You are not going to
Yeah.
interview him. He's going to interview
Yeah.
you. And it was not the prime
Right.
minister, but his office, his principal secretary. So I
Yeah.
went, this is you guys are not doing, and this is not done. And as journalists, I've been to prime minister's office a number of times since Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time. And I used to go
Sure.
meet with the media advisors, talk to them. They will take your counsel. I had already been in journalism for about 30 years at that time. And
Yeah.
but for Manmohan Singh, I had interviewed a lot of prime ministers. So the problem that time was that a narrative in the media and on the streets on Jantar Mantar was being created that this prime minister is not good for the country and the government is besieged with all kind of things. Then we had this whole coal and uh, coal allocation crisis. We had the 2G allocation crisis, and everything
2G,
was
Commonwealth. Yeah.
Commonwealth. Everything was coming in the papers all the time, and they were unable to deal with that. So I said that you have to number one shift to television and social media because that's where the criticism was the worst. And so they said, okay, you do it. I said, fine, I'll try my best. But looking back, I think by that time the damage had been done. Uh,
Right.
yeah, damage to his image and damage to the government had been done. So we tried for about 2.5 years to basically deflect this onslaught of criticism and allegations and charges. But it was too late, I guess. And at one point of time, I used to think that this is a dragon too big to slay for me. I was one person, by the way. I didn't
Right.
have a single paisa of budget from Prime Minister's office communication. I was told not a single rupee. And you'll be shocked that I used to call your colleagues, from office for briefings and all that, the samosas and tea used to come out from the kitty of Prime Minister's staff's budget because I was not given a single paisa to do that.
And
And
why was that? Because if you're supposed to fulfill the responsibilities of a communications advisor, you should have been given some budget, right?
that is where his theory comes, his ideology comes. He said, I'm doing my work. I'm doing my work.
Hmm.
It's there for everyone to see. My life is an open book. That was one of the things he used to say. My life is an open book. There's nothing going on. Whatever I'm doing is doing basically for to make this country resilient. And the future generations, that he had a very underprivileged childhood. The future
Yes.
generation should not face all this. So that was his line. He said, "No, I don't want this publicity and all that." There were so many times I used to, tell him that we can do this, we can do that, kind of a thing. And but he said he stuck to what he wanted to do. He was
Do you think it was a
uncomfortable.
mistake on his part? Mr. Pachauri, sorry, I'm interrupting you. But do you think it was a mistake on his part, given what was happening in 2012? I mean, of course, now we know that AAP, came out of that movement, and AAP has government in 2 states now. I mean, Delhi and Punjab. But that entire period was marked by such vitriolic criticism. Some of it, of course, did have some merit, but a lot of it where he perhaps suffered the consequences of it. Do you think it was a mistake on his part at that point in time to not go ahead and talk to the world about his side of the story?
See, his thing was my work will speak for itself, and the work was
History
good.
will be kind to him,
Yeah,
right?
and the work was good. If I remember, I have interacted with the press publicly. We used to have a lot of briefings in the PMO. I interacted with the press publicly only once when the Press Club of India invited me to talk to the journalists. They said there are too many requests that you should come. So I went there only once. And at that time, I had taken a lot of data to tell people and show them. And this is the data you've been seeing in the last now 10 years. This is the data people are talking about. The number of people pulled out of poverty, the FDI, uh, uh, the new legislation, the rights-based legislations, right to food, right to education, Aadhaar, uh, uh, direct benefit transfers, all these things which we are talking about today, and these things have been bolstered and improved by the government in the last 10 years. They were happening at that time. I still remember the head of uh, uh, Aadhaar, Nandan Nilekani. He used to come to brief the prime minister almost every week and tell him that this is what's happened and DBT, and how many gas cylinders have been distributed, and it was like going really fast. Every week he'll come, it will be like 100%, 125%, and crores of new additions to that. So that those things were happening. But the other thing was a political thing. I was an official in the Prime Minister's office. I'm a government official. I couldn't take on his critics who were political. I couldn't,
Right.
yeah, I could contradict people on political criticism. I can only put my point of view forward, that nothing has happened in coal, but they will show it to you, oh, this is what the CAG has said. I say, but CAG has also said this. I remember that when the coal story came out, the very day in the evening, we put out a contradiction to that story. And the allegations and the CAG report was carried as it is with big, huge banner headlines. But our contradiction was not, because that was the mood of the nation. The mood of the nation has become very foul. And that was
And
because of
as you were perhaps
political.
saying earlier, it was too late by then anyway, because the damage had been done. But having said that, there are a bunch of other things which I want to talk to you about. And that's because, of course, I mean, you joined him much, much later. I mean, towards the end of his tenure as a prime minister in 2012. But having said that, you had, of course, as a journalist, sort of, been keeping a close eye on what the government was doing. And one of those things is, people want to know what was the inside story of how the prime minister used to react to all of these criticisms which he used to face. I mean, you've told us that, of course, he used to feel that the history will be kind to him and he'll be judged perhaps a little more kindly later on. But at that point in time, when he used to, face this kind of criticism from the opposition, did he talk to you, or what did he used to say?
Uh, we used to talk about the story and the media coverage almost every day. I was one of the the last people to meet him at days sometimes, because there's so much going on. And
Right.
you started the broadcast by saying "Kuch to log kahenge." He used to quote his vice chancellor from Punjab University, and he used to say that people will say what they want to say. So let them say what they want to say. I'll just keep doing my work. He used to quote, I'm forgetting the name of the vice chancellor at that time. And he used to say that.
Right.
He said, "Mujhe apna kaam karna hai. And I'm not here to, he used to say, to make myself larger than life. I'm not here to indulge in propaganda." I mean,
But I'm sure it hurt him when he used to hear
it
such
did.
monikers, reluctant PM, accidental
It did.
PM,
It did.
remote control prime minister, and so on.
See, we never used to talk after office hours, not too much. Only once he
Mhm.
called me up when some channel, which was running a headline called "Choron ka Sardar" around 10 in the night. That was, I remember that evening very well, and I was not at home, and I took that call, and they said that the PM is very upset with this. And I rang up the owner and the editor of that news channel, and I never used to do that. I was not used to. I mean, this person was my boss. I had a very good stint at this publication, and it was a very good publication. But when I said, "Did you?" So this was the whole moral thing which became. So the only thing I could tell the editor was that this is a kind of story being carried on your channel which you would have thrown if a reporter had filed it to you, because no reporter can file a story without any authentication and say "Choron ka Sardar" as a headline. I discussed that with him. And I say, I don't talk to him. This was only one instance when I called up someone out of office hours and tried to sort of reason out on things. So it did hurt him. It did hurt him. It did hurt his family. My heart goes out to them that they were there and they were looking at this spectacle of their father, who was a very dignified and a very well educated and proved all over the world his worth. He was being vilified like this. I really do. And for the last 2 3 days, I've never talked about it. That time I used to do my work, never used to talk about it on media and all that. I never wrote anything in any newspaper. I didn't do anything because I was following his lead. In last 2 3 days, you'll be wondering why I'm talking about it, because I think the man's record has to be put straight. I've given more than 20 interviews about him after his death. For the reason being that I do not want that legacy to be besmirched. I want, the history to be corrected. I want all these people who are making these allegations at that time told that they have not been nice to a very nice person, that they have been
Right.
absolutely, this was injustice, that whole injustice against him of being,
Yeah.
vilified
You know,
for
you know,
things. You've seen the
and the thing is,
outcome of these cases, the 2G, the coal, and all that. You've seen the outcome of these cases. So we were right at that time, but no one listened to you because there was this whole political narrative which was made, which from the Prime Minister's office as a government uh, institution, we could not fight. It was to be fought in the political arena, over which I had no control over. I could
right.
not do.
Now, that's the political arena. Of course, you're talking about the opponents and the criticism of his policies,
Yes, yes.
and some of these allegations which were made by CAG, etc. But we'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about his legacy in a little bit from now. But before that, what I also want to talk to you about is, of course, the internal party dynamics. I mean, he was the prime minister, but of course, Sonia Gandhi was at the helm of affairs at that point in time in the Congress party. So what was that dynamic like between the prime minister's office and Mrs. Sonia Gandhi? Because there are a lot of stories, books have been written, a lot have come out. But how he used to react? Did he confide in you about any of those stories?
See, I tell you what, there was this whole wall of China. The political interactions used to take place when Mrs. Gandhi and the core committee, as it was known, they used to assemble almost every week. And to tell you the truth, I never used to go to those because I'm an official. I've got nothing to do with party politics. So I never used to go for these core committee things. I'll ring
Right.
up someone in the core committee to find out is there anything happened which you think would be important, will come out in the papers tomorrow, because you also have to be on top of what's going out in the press after that core committee. So that's the only thing. So we were totally away. He used to uh, 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 he used to also wanted that to be that way, that my office it's totally separate from the political thing. And there
Did
was
you ever
times.
find yourself in a position? Did you ever find yourself in a position where what you had to communicate on behalf of the prime minister was perhaps not exactly in sync with what the party was saying?
uh, Party, I was not day to day, ball by ball. You can't do that. You can just talk
Right.
about what the prime minister is talking about. I remember, Telangana bifurcation talks
Yeah.
were taking place, and they had called Mr. Advani, Mr. Jetli, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, and they were like criticizing him all the time, and they were saying all kind of things about him, in the parliament, outside parliament. And there was this meeting, and because it was an administrative matter, because the announcements had to be made, I was there. And I remember these people came out. Now I knew all these dramatis personae, as you say, because I have known Mr. Jetli for like 30 years, because
Yeah.
I used to be on BJP beat. So I just told him that, are you going to make any announcement? Because I don't want them to report about the meeting with the prime minister. So say, are you going to make any announcement? He said, no. I said, we are also not going to make any announcement. Simple. So you keep it separate. Let it be then to the party to deal with it. because this was a semi political administrative affair. So this is how it was working, and he had and his instructions were very clear, that I do not want to tom what I'm doing day to day and every day. And I'll just give you one example, simple example, how
Sure.
sensitive he was to media and to media criticism. So there was this proposal about the Press Club of India had been allotted land next to the building where it is right now on the same road.
Hmm.
They came and they said that we want to construct a new Press Club of India down the road, and we would like the Prime Minister to lay the foundation stone at least. It will take a long time for that construction to happen. And
Right.
this was about towards the end of 2013. And I took the proposal to him. I said, these people had come and they want this. And I thought, it's a great thing. There'll be like a Press Club of India forever with the Dr.
Yeah.
Manmohan Singh's foundation stone name on it. And I thought
Yeah.
it's going to be a big win. He said, so close to the elections, I remember his words, I don't want to be seen currying favors with the press. And that thing never
Right.
happened. I mean, that I think that allotment is also now gone back, and press club people are, fighting in the court about that. So
Yeah.
this was
Yeah. Yeah.
he was very sensitive about it, not just about his image. That I don't want to be seen as a prime minister who's currying favor with the press so close to the election. So he made like a lot of sacrifices, and I'm speaking to you seriously that I don't want those sacrifices to go totally unnoticed, and I want to
Right.
put the record straight that here was a good man who was doing good things. And because of the politics of that time, he used to say it very clearly that all this I see, the criticism and allegations, not against me personally, it's because I'm sitting on this chair and they want this chair. Simple. And
Right.
that
Right.
was that was the thought behind all whatever he did. And that's why, I
So
mean,
that was the politics then. And talking about the politics now, of course, after he was cremated, allegations have been flying around. Congress has said, of course, Mallikarjun Kharge has commented on it. Rahul Gandhi has said a few things. Arvind Kejriwal also chimed in, and that is about the prime minister not being accorded the kind of respect perhaps that he deserved. And the demand was that there should have been a memorial which should have been built. And what do you think about that?
see, I the man I knew, I think he should be sitting somewhere up there, and he would be very amused by this. I'm telling you.
Right.
And because he said that this is not a personal thing, that you make a memorial and all that. He said, my policies, if we take those policies forward, if we make hospitals in his name and you set up universities in his name and have a new education policy in his name, that's what I think this is my thing, my personal observation about it. what the
Shashi Tharoor,
party what
Shashi
the
Tharoor also
party
said, I mean, perhaps naming a university after him would be an appropriate
I don't
thing
know.
to
I
do.
can't
Yes.
comment. I can't comment because
Right. Right.
to tell you the truth, seriously, I have not talked to these people in last 10 years. The
Right.
politicians who were involved at that time. I go once a year or something in a function which is held in the name of. There's a function in the name of Mrs. Gandhi. There's an international award given. I just attend that. I say hi to all the people because that is something I believe in. That global personalities should be given recognition in India, and I do that. I don't want to. At that time, I didn't get into involved into politics, so this time I'm like really far away from that.
Right. Right. Having said that, before I let you go, last question to you. And if you were to tell me in a minute, what do you think Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's legacy is going to be? And do you think history will be as kind as he hoped it would be to him?
History is going to be kinder to him more than what's happening in last 2 3 days after his passing away, because the work he did, and silently the kind of work he did. See, here was a man who had uh, who had really felt the poverty of India post partition India. He had really felt the pain firsthand. He wanted to remove the pain not just for him but for as many people he wanted. So he had a vision for that. He studied economics, he studied trade, his PhD was on trade, he went to the best of the institutions in the world. So he had a vision how this can be done on trade, on how India can be improved financially and economically. So that's one. Second, because of his this consensus making, 10 years is a long time to run a coalition government. So
Indeed.
this whole consensus making, so he had a strategy to implement that vision, that we'll take people. He used to say very clearly that 10 things, I mean, in a coalition government, I'd like to do 10 things, but if I strike like 7 or 8, it's good enough. So like he had a common minimum program in his head, that this can happen, this cannot happen. So that's one, the strategy to implement that. And then he had this empathy, that what I'm doing is fine. And he related to the people actually for whom he was working for. He was not just working for, he was told a neoliberalizer, and I've seen him
Yeah.
deal with all the corporate honchos. It was same as he's deal with the staff in a staff party in PMO. I mean, what the people we think, who are on the cover of the magazines and they are running this multi-billion-dollar businesses. His uh, uh, behavior towards them was similar as to you and me. I mean, until about a few months back, he'll insist, despite the problems he was having with his knees and his diabetes, he'd insist to come out and see you off at the porch where the car was.
Yeah.
So he was that kind
Right.
of man. He didn't believe in in posts and this whole charade of power. No, he said, "You're my friend. I'll come and see you off." Simple. And each time we'll have this discussion that no, you keep sitting, I'll go, I know my way out and all. Every time it will happen. And I used to meet him quite a lot initially, but then he was not well, so I started, staggering my this thing. I met him in I think September or August this year last, and
Yeah.
the same thing. Yeah, the same thing. He said, I can't walk, so he asked Mrs. Kaur to say that see him off. Simple. I've got nothing to do with him. I can't give him anything. I can't, I have nothing to offer to him. But that's the decency of the man, and that's the integrity of the man, and that's why I'm talking to you, Abhishek. That I
Yeah.
want that decency and integrity to be known to the people who have been uh, brainwashed about this man, Dr. Singh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pachauri, for taking out the time and talking to us. And, just like you, I will also hope that history is perhaps going to be as kind to him as he hoped. Thank you so much, Mr. Pachauri, for taking out the time and talking to us.
Thank you, Abhishek.